Children, I do believe it's time for your bedtime story. What shall it be tonight? I think central state theory successfully solves the problem of naive behaviourism. It's decided then. Tonight we will be discussing the question of, does the central state theory successfully solve the problem of naive behaviourism? First, I'll outline what behaviourism and an offshoot of behaviourism called dispositional behaviourism are and discuss some problems with them. Then I will pose David Armstrong's alternative to behaviourism, central state theory, and discuss some problems that may arise from it. So, what is behaviourism? Behaviourism is a theory that dictates that the mind is not an inner arena but an outward act. According to behaviourism, the mind is not something internal or behind a behaviour as Descartes or a dualist might suggest, but rather it is simply a part of physical behaviour. David Armstrong uses the example of anger to exemplify behaviourism. The anger that one feels is not something that brings about aggressive behaviour, but rather is the aggressive behaviour itself. Behaviourism fits well with the materialist or physicalist account of the world. However, two difficulties arise. The first being that this theory is all well and good from a third-person point of view. We can look at a person walking down the street and say, look, that person is behaving in such and such a way. They have a mind. However, from a first-person perspective, it is not quite so simple. We will look at ourselves and see that yes, we are exhibiting certain behaviours, and we should conclude from this alone that we have a mind. But it is difficult to believe that there is nothing behind these behaviours. From a first-person perspective, it seems that we have thoughts and ideas that precede actions and behaviours. The second issue stems from the first. It is that we can seemingly have internal thoughts without exhibiting any corresponding actions. Gilbert Ryle provides a solution to this last problem with an amended form of behaviourism called dispositional behaviourism. The idea here is that one has the disposition to behave in a certain way under certain circumstances. For example, a glass has the disposition to break. It is brittle. Under certain circumstances, a glass will shatter. However, the breaking of the glass is not the brittleness. It is the manifestation of the brittleness. The brittleness itself is just the disposition. And so, there is a distinction between the disposition and its manifestations. It is clear that a glass can be brittle and survive for 100 years without the brittleness manifesting and the glass shattering. This solves the problem of thought without action. One may have the disposition to behave angrily and not have the anger manifest itself. However, the disposition is not the cause of the behaviour, merely the liability of something to act in a certain way. However, despite Ryle's alternative, Armstrong remains unsatisfied with dispositional behaviourism as an explanation of the mind, as it still does not solve the first problem raised. There still seems as if, from the first-person point of view, there is something going on behind behaviours and dispositions that cause actions. To solve this problem, Armstrong suggests that the mind can be defined as something that is the inner cause of behaviours rather than the behaviours themselves. He calls these inner causes of action mental states. Armstrong suggests a different way of looking at Ryle's dispositions, the way a scientist would view them. A scientist would assume that an object has a basic state that characterises how it behaves. They would then look at, for example, the brittleness of glass, and explain it in terms of its physical structure. And so, instead of being a disposition, the brittleness is a state. It can then be said that states are responsible for their manifestations. The molecular construction, or state of a glass, is responsible for breaking when struck. This entails that the same applies to a person's dispositions, that they are merely states, or mental states. Mental states are all that there are. They are perception of the world around us, which act as stimuli to actions. And so, the problem with behaviourism is solved. If this is accepted, then it is clear that we are capable of inner mental events. This being said, Armstrong's account neither proves nor disproves a physicalist or materialist account of the mind. However, he is confident that if science can be trusted as our best method of gaining reliable information and knowledge, then a physical account of the mind and mental states can be reached. Armstrong says that science can be trusted on the basis that, unlike other fields, it reaches general consensus within its own community of experts, and as a result is the only field that reaches any kind of certainty. Science has an increasing capacity for explaining physical phenomena, and the scientific consensus currently seems to be that of an entirely physico-chemical account of man. He believes that science would identify mental states specifically as physical states of the central nervous system and brain. Beyond this, though, if any more detail is required, it is for science to determine. So, Armstrong says that this is the closest we can get to saying the mind is a physical thing. Armstrong's account of the mind and the central state theory have a number of objections and criticisms, two of which will be discussed here. Armstrong's account of the mind does not solve Descartes' problem of first philosophy. The argument from doubt, the one that says that our senses deceive us, and therefore information received through them cannot be trusted, still leads to doubt about the existence of the outside world when applied to the mind, as Armstrong explains it. The second issue is that this account of the mind does not entirely describe the mind as we perceive it. Armstrong says that mental states are perceptions caused by the outside world, which in turn cause actions. For example, if I burn my finger, I perceive that I have burnt my finger. I perceive that it causes me pain, and these perceptions, or mental states, cause me to find something to soothe the pain. However, nowhere in this account do we find the actual pain. I am expressing the pain, grimacing, shaking my hand about, and searching for cold water. But where is the actual pain? As we can see, Armstrong's theory of the mind does solve the problem of naive behaviourism. The proposal that the mind is something that causes behaviour is, to me, more intuitive than the belief that one's behaviour is one's mind. However, in solving the problem of behaviourism, it raises objections of its own. Personally, I believe that Armstrong is correct in searching for a physical explanation of the mind, and that his idea, if not conclusive, does provide a believable and justifiable account of the mind in physical terms. Well, my children, that is all the time we have for tonight.